Hello, and welcome to Decades. In today's video, we are in Cornwall, the southwesternmost county of England. For those who are unfamiliar with where in the world or where in England that is, it's here. Being positioned next to my homeland Devon, it was always inevitable that we would wind up here at some point. Cornwall is famous for its picturesque coastline, its gorgeous landscapes, and is home to the final boss of the West Country accents. And to top it all off, it's a rather popular tourist destination within England. And if you spend more than 5 minutes in this county, you will probably find out why. But of course, its drawing factor for me was always going to be the history. So in today's video, we're firing up the Ford Mondeo and heading to a beautiful town called Tintagel to visit a castle synonymous with the Arthurian Legend, and that is of course the stunning ruins of Tintagel Castle. Which in itself sounds like a great plan, and we came here in the summer specifically because there would be less chance of adverse weather conditions standing between us and this stunning scenery. So we planned to visit on the Saturday, the day before we drove home to the northwest of England. And yeah, as it turns out, that went swimmingly, with Tintagel having to close due to adverse weather. So we devised a scheme to squeeze in a visit the morning of our drive home. Sunday had more agreeable weather, so job's a good un. And though that made Sunday an incredibly long day, I am beyond glad that we managed to fit it in the end. Its history is one thing, but Tintagel Castle is a place to go to be reminded of how utterly awe-inspiring the world's beauty truly is. And hopefully my novice-level cinematography can do that justice as we explore this place's history. One can find the ruins of the medieval Tintagel Castle sat atop a cliff on the rocky north coast of Cornwall. It's aesthetically pleasant, to put it lightly. However, this place boasts a strong link to the legends of King Arthur. Of course, sadly, evidence to suggest the aforementioned legend is real is scant at best. To this day, the historical basis for King Arthur has been debated extensively, but fortunately for Tintagel, its history and legend are somewhat connected, meaning we can go off the rails and talk about the legendary King of the Britons and explore what brings significance to Tintagel Castle. So before we start receiving angry comments, let's dive in. It's unclear if an Iron Age fort stood at Tintagel prior to the Roman occupation of England. Tintagel's beginnings appear to have been somewhat slow. In the 1st century CE, the Roman Empire invaded southern Britain. However, the territory that comprises modern-day Cornwall was considered insignificant due to its remoteness and sparse population. However, Cornwall was assigned to the Roman administrative region of Dumnoniorum, named after the local tribal groups known to the Romans as the Dumnoni. Dumnoni? Oh God. The local tin streaming industry would attract attention in the centuries that followed. There would be several routes established in Cornwall under the Romans, 2 of which were observed to have markers nearby to Tintagel, meaning a road passed nearby at the very least, and the Romans liked their roads to be as direct as possible, meaning the place may have had some function at this time, and in failing that, perhaps somewhere nearby did. Tintagel Island, however, would not be observed to have any structures from this time. The Romans did not settle Tintagel, as it seems neither did any native Brits prior to their arrival. Pottery and Roman coins would, however, be found here, dating to the 3rd and 4th centuries, suggesting that habitation could have been present at Tintagel, even in absence of substantial evidence to prove any buildings stood in this period. It's also entirely possible that ships would moor nearby or stop and goods would be carried onto the land. Anyway, Roman control over Britain would dissolve following the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century, leaving England to be divided into several kingdoms ruled independently. The land of modern-day Devon and Cornwall would become the Kingdom of Dumnonia. That one's gonna stump me. It's unclear what Tintagel's purpose actually was during the early medieval period, referred to as the early Middle Ages, or if you're feeling controversial, the Dark Ages. Some believe Tintagel was home to a monastery, and others suggest it was some form of settlement for the elite of Domnonia's society. From this time period, many luxury items have been discovered at Tintagel, such as goods from as far as the Mediterranean. Exported pottery discovered on this site was considered to be significantly greater in number than expected for a site dated to roughly the 6th century CE in Britain or Ireland. This has led a few archaeologists to believe that perhaps Tintagel served as a site where ships would dock to deposit cargo from faraway lands such as southern Europe. The outlines of a palace dating to the 5th or 6th century would be uncovered on the site during a dig funded by English Heritage in 2017. Along with it, they found a slate with writing upon it. Tintagel appears to have been an important stronghold from the 5th to 7th centuries and is believed to have been a residence for the rulers of Cornwall, as the extent of luxury pottery discovered here suggests that once upon a time this particular site held power or at least some form of importance. However, Tintagel's history would grow a bit dim for a few centuries, but it wouldn't stay buried forever. This is where the local legend begins to factor. In 12th century cleric and historical writer Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, known as the Historia Regum Britanniae, he named Tintagel as the site where legendary King Arthur would be conceived with the help of a mystical figure named Merlin. Geoffrey of Monmouth would be monumental in the perpetuation of the legend, which is rooted far deeper into Welsh folklore especially. As a result, Tintagel to this day has enjoyed a deep association with the Arthurian legend. The detailed account given by Geoffrey claims that Arthur's father, a man named Uther Pendragon, was king of all Britain and was at war with Gorlois, the Duke of Cornwall, with the objective of capturing his wife, Igraine. Gorlois would supposedly send Igraine to Tintagel Castle, his safest bastion. In order to get into the fortress, Uther summoned Merlin, who used his magical powers to conceal Uther's appearance beneath that of Gorlois. Wearing a magical apparition of his enemy's skin, Uther gained entry to Tintagel, where he found Igraine, did the dip and dash, and Arthur was supposedly conceived. Obviously, it's a tall tale. We all know that wizards that can conceal your appearance have respectable names like Gary. The legend and Geoffrey of Monmouth's books became incredibly popular, however, being spread far across Britain during the late medieval period. This led to the production of more texts detailing the Arthurian legend, with some even suggesting Arthur would be born at Tintagel, though Geoffrey of Monmouth did not suggest that. And that brings us back to more factual history. In the early 13th century, Richard, the first Earl of Cornwall, would trade with a man named Gervase de Tintagel, trading lands for the legendary site of Tintagel Castle. In the years that followed, Richard would construct a castle on the site in the 1230s in order to establish a connection with the Arthurian legends, as a result of Geoffrey of Monmouth's detailing of the legendary king's conception at the site. It was also deemed a traditional place for Cornish royalty, so no doubt Richard also took the opportunity to claim his legitimacy to the title he held. But Tintagel offered no real significant strategic benefit, leading many to believe that this was done purely because Richard was inspired by the legends to construct the castle, and this would be reinforced by the fact that the castle was designed to look as if it had been there for centuries. Earl Richard was eager to exploit Tintagel's fame off the back of Geoffrey of Monmouth's accounts, and the records of Tintagel's actual use are sparse. We know that Richard received his nephew, Prince Dafydd ap Llywelyn of Wales, a name that I botched really badly, in 1242, who wasn't especially loyal to King Henry III. However, Richard would later campaign in Wales on behalf of the king against his own nephew. Richard, outside of this, spent a lot of his time entertaining politics and conquest, going on a crusade to the Holy Land in 1240, and becoming elected the King of the Romans in 1257, meaning he spent a lot of time in what is now modern-day Germany between then and his death in 1272. As you can imagine, Cornwall wasn't often on his to-visit list. Anyway, the Earls of Cornwall following Richard's death took little to no interest in Tintagel Castle, leaving it to the High Sheriff of Cornwall. The reason being it was built out of vanity to exploit a legend rather than to satisfy any immediate base need such as security, as is often the purpose of castles, to assert security and dominance. The castle would be used as a prison though, and its land would be let to locals as pasture for livestock. All the while, the castle fell into disrepair rather quickly, with reports of the Great Hall's roof being removed in the 1330s due to its decaying state. With the constant coastal erosion at the site, especially impacting the narrow strip of land connecting the elevated isle to the mainland, it was tricky to maintain. The castle would, for the most part, almost as quickly as it was built, be left to ruin. That being said, a small number of people would staff the island, including a chaplain employed to maintain the castle. 2 high-status prisoners would be brought to Tintagel from London during the closing stages of the 14th century for safekeeping, and English poet John Leyland would visit the castle in the 1540s, recording his discovery of a makeshift bridge constructed out of tree trunks giving access to the island. Besides that, in 1583, due to the looming threat of an invasion from Spain, a survey recommended reinforcing the headland against the prospect of foreign landings. The site would be, for the most part, deserted by 1600, however it was symbolically seized from the Duchy of Cornwall by the Commonwealth government of the 1650s, following the English Civil War. And I say symbolically because it's not like this deserted place was in use anyway, being returned upon the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. All the while, the most significant occurrence on the isle was the sheep grazing upon it. Tintagel would remain quiet until the 19th century, when the Arthurian legend resurged in popularity during the Victorian era. As a result, the ruins of Tintagel Castle would become something of a tourist destination, a status it has enjoyed since. Today, Tintagel Castle is under the management of English Heritage. It's one of a handful of English heritage sites at risk of destruction due to coastal erosion. Historically, it is believed portions of the complex have fallen into the sea, and with the rising sea level and frequent storms, it may not be terribly long in the grand scheme of the universe before this glorious, gorgeous site could be lost forever. On a more positive note, this is one of English Heritage's most popular sites, receiving approximately 200,000 visitors a year. It's the kind of place I recommend coming to visit because when you do, you can absolutely see why. Tintagel Castle and the surrounding island is jaw-dropping in its beauty, with the sea bashing against the rocks below you, the high bridge crossing from the mainland to the isle itself. The ruins of the castle and the surrounding areas come together to create stunning image after stunning image. So if you're ever in the magical land of Cornwall, maybe take a day trip to Tintagel. It takes a few hours to soak it all in, but the scenery and history come together to create an amazing atmosphere. And then on top of that, you've got Arthurian legends and folklore to enjoy too. All in all, I really enjoyed visiting this place. It may have lots of visitors, but it's clearly designed to handle that. They even have Land Rovers to hand to quickly get you back up to the town of Tintagel itself after your visit is done. And that's just a little bit over the top, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. So thank you all for watching today's video. We really hope that you've enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, and maybe share this channel with your friends. That would be massively appreciated. And with any luck, we'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, take care, goodbye.